Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Let's do something extraordinary today. What do you say? Yay. Something that on the face of it seems impossible. Okay? We're about to overrule what is called common sense. We're about to rely on an ability within ourselves that cannot be explained, and some would say cannot even exist. We're about to engage in that act which is called worship, in which we try to catch a glimpse of a reality that underlies and may even seem to contradict the evidence of our workaday world. Now, for this undertaking, we do not need special abilities. We do not need degrees in philosophy or science. All we need is already here. We brought it with us. We need the support of our fellow travelers. We need open hearts and open minds, and we need the trust of the innocent as we now invite the Holy Spirit to come and join us. So let this morning's attempt be fulfilling, let it be meaningful, and let's not forget, let it be fun too. We'll start by singing. We'll sing number 22 in the Purple Book, which is called Come Strong God and Walk Beside Us. And Law will move the camera. I found this reading online, and it's by Loretta Williams, someone I don't know, but I would really like to let these words touch us. And it's almost as if she is speaking to us. We, bearers of the dream, affirm that a new vision of hope is emerging. We pledge to work for that community in which justice will be actively present. We affirm that there is a struggle yet ahead. Yet we know that in the struggle is the hope for the future. So we affirm that we are co-creators of the future, not passive pawns. And we stand united in affirmation of our hope and vision of a just and inclusive society. We affirm the unity of all persons. We affirm brotherhood and sisterhood that allows us to touch upon each other's humanity. We affirm a unity that opens our eyes, ears, and hearts to see the different but common forms of oppression, of suffering, and pain. Yet we are one in the image of God, and we celebrate our hopes for human unity. Within ourselves and within the gathered community, we will discover the strength not to hide in indifference, affirming that hope publicly expressed energizes and enables us to move forward. And so together we pledge action to transcend barriers, be they racial, political, economic, social, or religious. We pledge to make our tomorrows become our todays. So thank you, Loretta. Let's have a song from Lowell.
Shall I have the mic?
You may.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello, Mike. Adam and Eve on a Saturday night, that's when the trouble started. She said, Adam, let's go for a bite. She led him through the garden. And ever since then, we're trying to comprehend that mystery emotion. But we might as well try, count the stars in the sky, or catch the teardrops in the ocean. True love, deeper than deep, hotter than any fire. It's hard to find, harder to keep, the thing we most desire. I spent so many nights alone, I was beginning to wonder if I had run out of chances to find a spell that I could fall under. Then you walked in like in an Elvis film, you were singing Love Me Tender. It's I was hypnotized by the look in your eyes, and the next thing I remember, it's true love, deeper than deep, hotter than any fire. It's hard to find and it's harder to keep, the thing we most desire. And there's true love in a winking eye, and that sweet perfume that lingers. It's the I love you in a new tattoo, and that diamond at her fingers. True love, deeper than deep, hotter than any fire. It's hard to find and it's harder to keep the thing we most desire. It's hard to find and it's harder to keep the thing we most desire.
Lovely, thank you, Lowell. Was that Gordon Lightfoot?
Don Williams.
Okay.
Don Williams, yeah, true love.
Well, let's take a time now and get ourselves ready. Let's take a deep breath and relax. Because in this time of reflection now, we focus on each other. Familiar faces, some known for years, some only this morning. We allow ourselves to understand just what a miracle it is that we have gathered here, bringing just ourselves as offerings to this attempt at worship that we make together. And we imagine the wealth of experience, depth, and breadth of life that is in this small gathering and out there in the wider world, reached through the internet. We think of the opportunity that this house of love really would be if we had but the courage to move beyond the merely superficial. We are aware also of the problems, of the feelings of loss shared by us all as individuals, the pain that life invariably brings. And so we resolve to take more care with each other, to see in each the potential for healing and for wholeness. We do this knowing that by such concern, that it is we ourselves who will be healed. Now, in a few moments of silence, let's reach out to each other, those here and those we cannot see, in love. One God of our true hearts, be kind to us. Be kind by being insistent. Take away from us the half-light of pretense and defense into the freedom of an honest heart. If we are not used to this honesty, tempt us with love. Strengthen us with courage, but hold us steady in the warmth of this community. That's our prayer this morning. So be it. Inshallah. Shalom. Amen. This next piece, number 43 in the Green Book, is a Hungarian melody, I believe. And I think Norbert Čapek had to do with, did he write the words or was the music traditional Hungarian melody, isn't it? Right. Check him, right. Yeah, okay. So, so let's sing that. Number 43 in the Green Book, Universal Spirit. Yes, I think Norbert Čapek wrote the lyrics or participated in that. And of course, Norbert Čapek is one of our heroes, the martyr that was killed by the Nazis and who designed our flower communion, which we do every spring. Well, we had a big old meeting here yesterday of people from around our district, some 26 churches in London and the Southeast. And during part of it, I did an introductory little address, and I mentioned a part of our history that I don't think we pay quite enough attention to. And I'm speaking about our history of concern for those who are currently defined as one of the following initials, L, G, B, T, Q. I often think it ought to be Q, W, E, R, T, Y, and so on, because they keep adding initials to it. Gay, bisexual, and trans people. But it's more than just tipping our hats to the millions among us who love people of the same gender. The clue is in the word history. It's a time to look back at the years and centuries behind us and to see what has happened. Just try to see what has gone on during our lifetimes. And if possible, to make clearer the road ahead, which is the real purpose of history. And in order to do that, I'll ask anyone who's listening now, those who define themselves as gay and or straight, to take a trip with me into your imagination. Imagine finding yourself in a world where there was something wrong with you, where you'd been created without giving your consent to it, but there were some parts left out or else deficient in some way. And all around you, voices would be saying that you were created by God, but that somehow that bit of you was broken and had to be fixed, or you were lost. Try as hard as you might, you couldn't change whatever it was that was broken. And little by little, despair would eat into your life. Well, if that sounds familiar, it's not just to those people who are identifying as gay or lesbian. It's because that's exactly what the early Unitarians were confronted with as well. St. Augustine's doctrine of original sin meant that merely by being born, you were in a state of, and this is a direct quote from him, utter depravity and doomed to hell, based on the fact that you were formed during an act of sex between your parents. And out of the anguish of that condition, people started to get together to talk about it, to try to form a new vision of what life is all about. They had to be really secretive at first because the state had arranged terrible punishments for thinking the way they did. Some of them were imprisoned and disgraced, and yes, I'm talking about our Unitarians. Once in a while, they were executed. But because of their persistence, you might say their defiance, things began to change. Laws were amended, and even though they were still not welcome in political or educational circles, for example, a Unitarian was not allowed into Oxford University until 1920. At least they were free to express their beliefs without fear of prison. But also, by now, you can be aware that I could as easily have been talking about the history of gay men and women in this country. Born into a straight world, but somehow you're different. You're told you're created by God, but the scary book, you know the one I mean, the Bible, that they waved at you, said your feelings and actions were sinful and would lead you to damnation. You were caught in what has been called in sociology a double bind, identified by Gregory Bateson. Conflicting messages pen you in from both directions. The human need to love, that thing that's automatic in you, that automatic sense of attraction or love, is one thing is very strong, and on the other thing, the need to be accepted. The need to be taken in, to be embraced by the culture into which you were born. And those two things, when they're in conflict, create a terrible dissonance in you. But what makes it a double bind, according to Bateson, is that the situation is not escapable. You're stuck. In other words, you are what you are. As La Cage aux Folles song went, I am what I am. In the 19th century, 56 men were hanged for the crime of physical love with another man. Many more spent years in prison, and even when released, they lived half lives of public vilification and shame. Many kept their secret and lived a life deprived of human touch, and still more committed suicide. That went on, just gradually improving little by little by little, but ever so slowly, until so recently that most of us here in this room can remember it. The rate of change for gay people was even slower than the change for Unitarians to worship. Oscar Wilde had to be a sacrificial lamb for an unforgiving society. Alan Turing, whose genius broke the Enigma code of the Nazis, was chemically castrated and driven to suicide. It wasn't until the mid-'60s, which I think of as being not that long ago, that sex between men was decriminalized. Note, I said decriminalized, not legalized. The stigma still remained. Lesbians were left out of the criminal prosecutions, in part, it's claimed, because Queen Victoria thought there was no such thing as a lesbian. She couldn't imagine it. Well, that might sound like a lucky break, but I think it was just one more example of society belittling women. By the 1970s, gay people had begun to mobilize. The Campaign for Homosexual Equality started their own branch here in 1971. And I remember something our dear friend, the late Ray Harvey Amber, said. He wrote me a little thing. And I've read it to you before, but listen again. And of course, Ray was the organizer, one of the organizers and sponsors of Rainbows Across Borders. He told me, you know, you've been involved since the beginning for us. And here's what he wrote for me. The organization was Croydon Campaign for Homosexual Equality. It was the antecedent organization of Croydon Area Gay Society, which we all know now. From June 1971, the group held regular meetings on the first Tuesday of each month at the Cherry Orchard Pub in Cherry Orchard Road. But on the 4th of January 1972, the 30 members arriving at the Cherry Orchard Pub were told in no uncertain terms by the landlord that they were no longer welcome. Homeless, the group looked around for other venues without success and settled on the Unitarian Church on Croydon Flyover. Monthly meetings at the Unitarian Church Hall then remained the main focus of the group's development campaigns and activities for many years. The Unitarians, together with many unsung LGBT heroes, helped to lay the foundations for civil and human rights for LGBT people. And then he adds, bravo. And I say, bravo, Ray. Well, I don't know about you, but that makes me feel proud. I feel proud. Then Stonewall was started in 1989. Things really started to get moving. We began to hear the word, that word, pride, in connection with the struggle. It doesn't take much imagination to realize why this word, above all, appears on banners, describes an annual parade, and recently was the title of a really stirring film. And if you haven't seen it, stream it from somewhere and see it. It speaks volumes because it goes directly to the heart of the dilemma of the double bind that I was talking about. You might now be more or less free to legally express your love how you want to, but the stigma, the secret that you have carried around all your life, still threatens from time to time to make you feel somehow left out of society. It's in overcoming this last vestige of oppression, because it's a really sticky one. It'll stay around unless we actively address it. That where caring people like us, gay and straight, have got a job to do. And we're lucky here at Croydon Unitarians. I'm looking out right now at some faces of people from two different African countries. Normally we have three. Who have been subjected to the full horrors of what has been removed from our culture. In Uganda, for example, if you have sex with somebody of your own gender, you face a prison term of about 14 years. If you identify as an activist, the penalty is life in prison. Until the rewriting of the legislation after a lot of international pressure, the penalty was death. If you know someone is gay and don't report them, even if you're heterosexual yourself, you face a prison term of up to 9 years. And that applies to organizations and third-party members of NGOs as well. If I were to take a holiday and go to Uganda and enjoy myself, and saw one of my friends from Rainbows there and didn't report them, well, I wouldn't be back for 9 years myself. You might think that churches would be expected to support gay people, but in fact, it was a team of American evangelical Christians, you know the ones I mean, often called the Happy Clappies, who advised Museveni in the first place, and the preachers Scott Lively and Rick Warren, who claims, by the way, to be able to cure homosexuality, are largely to blame for the recommendations that ultimately appeared in law. So now we're left with a question. I want to ask the question, are we as a society getting better? By better, I mean more liberal and forgiving of the differences among and between us. Does that slow drift toward reason and fairness reflect a reliable long-term thing, or is it just something of the moment? I think there's an even bigger question to ask. What the hell were we thinking all those years before we actually woke up to what was going on? What were we thinking when gay people were having to live half-lives that way? So the question, are we getting better? I would have to reply, yeah, we are, but not all at once. The metaphor I love is like the worm digging his way to the surface, making 2 inches of progress up and then slipping back an inch, and doing that over and over until he finally, in his last 2 inches, he breaks the surface and he won't fall back. Maybe it's like that for us. You read about thugs on the street and gay bashings and trans murders, and you despair. But then you read about the pensioner who was recently mugged and then got over 300 grand from people who saw his story online. Are we getting better? Well, it appears that we are lurching toward the surface, never knowing if one more heave will be the one that gets us there. And that raises another important question. If we have been blind to the injustice experienced by gay people through all the centuries, despite having ourselves as Unitarians tasted some injustice, what other elements, what other things in our common life conceal something that needs changing? What are we not seeing now? What are we looking over? And who better to show us the way than those who've been victims of our collective ignorance? The Brazilian educator and philosopher Paulo Freire, one of my heroes, once said something that's echoed in my mind for many years. He said, "It is the historic role of the oppressed to liberate the oppressors." That sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? It's the role of the oppressed to liberate the oppressors. If you consider the role of oppressed black people, say, in days before the Civil Rights Movement, or the role Stonewall and Pride parades have had in our thinking, it seems a bit less absurd. As we take our foot off the necks of the people beneath us, we are able to move more freely ourselves. When the dial of history is turned even slightly in a progressive direction, it's not just the liberated, oppressed people who benefit. It's all of us. And Frary's statement seems a bit less far-fetched. And I say this now in part to remind us, in case we forget, that over the last 7 years we've been lucky to have among us people from those very countries where being gay carried a death penalty. These are people who miss their homes. Believe me, they do. I can go around and ask each one of you, do you miss your home? What would the answer be? Yes, but I had to leave it. Like a friend of mine in Botswana once told me, a refugee from apartheid, he said, a refugee is someone whose heart is broken. Well, we have that among us. We have the opportunity to learn and to grow from people who've lived it. Having felt ourselves privately and as a culture move toward a new freedom awareness, there's yet another thing to consider. What other unfairnesses are we living right now without even noticing? What will we have to change someday to rectify them? When we do our head slapping and say, wow, how could we? What are those things? And who will show us how we need to change? Well, we have managed to open our hearts and our minds a little way. So let's get on with the job and help each other out as we do so. Thank you for hearing that. Amen. If I could do that, I'd never say another word from up there. It's true. That's incredible. Thank you. Trying to get myself together now, actually. Right, we're not taking offerings in the sock these days anymore, but there's a little wooden box out there if you want to put some money in. That's to keep things ticking over here while we wait for our lovely big old congregation to come back. Some of them sadly would have to come back from the grave to be here, but there are others out there, and they will come. So what is there to report about yesterday? We greeted some new ministers, and Jim Corrigal got himself inducted as the district minister, and we had a nice tea with sausage rolls and sandwiches and so on. With some left over. We have 2 events coming up in 3 weeks' time. We're going to have our combination anniversary service and harvest service. And I'm going to try to get Herbert and people to agree to come and sing for us. And we've got money to pay for transport for that. So we'd really like to have the RAB chorus here for that occasion. Is the 7th? Yeah. And then the carol service will be on the 19th of December. So those are things to write down. We're going to put it in a newsletter, which is being held up. Jim and Peter are held up waiting for me to produce something for them. So if there's anybody else that hasn't produced, shame on you. Yeah. Never too late to send something in, though. You should think about it. Have I forgotten anything now? No? Well, good. Let's sing. Here's a pretty song, number 192 in the Green Book, A New Community. Now may our words remind each other of the soul's wisdom. May our eyes be clear of the dust of mere confusion. May our hearts remain open to life and growth and love. And may we allow the Spirit to find us through the dense screen of our preoccupations. So may we look after one another, because we know we can. until we meet again. Amen.